Rating Amendment Bill 2024. This Council resumes the second reading debate on the shipping legislation use of fuels and Miscellaneous Amendment Bill 2024. Mr. Frankie Yick, Chairman of the Bills Committee on the bill, will first address the Council on the committee's report. Mr. Frankie Yick. President, as the Chairman of the Bills Committee on Shipping Legislation, Use of Fuels and Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2024, I now present a report on behalf of the committee and briefly summarize the key issues discussed. The purpose of this bill is to amend the Merchant Shipping Local Vessels Ordinance, Cap 548, and 4 subsidiary legislations to facilitate the use of more environmentally friendly, low-carbon, and even zero-carbon new fuels by vessels, while also regulating such usage. This includes empowering the Secretary for Transport and Logistics to make regulation by making direct reference to international agreements applicable to Hong Kong. The bill also revises the requirements concerning life-saving appliances on local vessels and introduces other relevant amendments. The Bills Committee generally supports the bill. Members expressed concern about the potential safety risk during the bunkering of new energy vessels using liquefied natural gas and methanol. Members urged the government to develop specific safety standards and procedures tailored to different types of fuels, including operational procedures, safety guidelines, and emergency measures, while taking into account practices from both the mainland and other countries. Regarding safety requirements for new fuel bunkering operations, the administration indicated that the technical requirements will be implemented through administrative measures such as the publication of codes of practice by Director of Marine in the Gazette. The government said that the codes of practice will consider not only vessel construction, design, and equipment, but also the procedures for safe operations. The Marine Department will refer to international standards, including those of the International Association of Classification Societies, as well as relevant standards from neighboring ports such as Shanghai and Singapore. As international standards on new fuel safety are still evolving, the government stated that only certain safety standards will be set forth in the subsidiary legislation, with more specific details to be included in the Code of Practice. To accommodate potential future developments of new energy fuels, the bill proposes to empower the Secretary under existing Section 89 of Cap 548 to make regulations in relation to the conveyance, storage, bunkering, use, transfer, and handling of fuels by local vessels. Members noted that the current shipping and port control regulations, Cap 313A, prohibit oil bunkering vessels exceeding 2,000 net tonnage from lying alongside another vessel for the purpose of bunkering. Similarly, the Merchant Shipping Local Vessels General Regulation, Cap 548F, and Section 27(1) also contains similar provisions. The administration explained that due to the increasing size of vessels, it is expected that the future fuel bunkering vessels will also become larger. The bill therefore proposes to amend these provisions so that the bunkering vessels of any tonnage may lie alongside another vessel for the purpose of bunkering. Some members raised concern about whether this proposed amendment would pose safety risks and asked the administration to explain the considerations and the safety standards that they have made reference to. The administration responded by clarifying that from a safety point of view, the size of bunkering vessels has no direct relationship with the occurrence of safety incidents, and the proposed removal of the tonnage restrictions will not compromise marine safety in Hong Kong. The administration further stated that both bunkering and receiving vessels must comply with applicable requirements under international conventions and local marine legislation that governs area including safety and prevention of marine pollution. Major bunkering hubs such as Singapore and Rotterdam do not impose size restrictions on bunkering vessels either. The administration therefore proposed to remove the requirements and restrictions on the size of the bunkering vessels. Members observed that the administration, in response to comments from the legal advisor to the Bills Committee, has proposed a minor amendment to correct inconsistency between the Chinese and English version of the bill. Members have no objection to this amendment. President, this concludes my report on the work of the Bills Committee. I will now share my personal views on behalf of the Liberal Party on the bill. The Liberal Party supports the bill so that we can offer greenfield bunkering services, and this is to implement the measures as set out in the policy address delivered by the Chief Executive to turn ourselves into an international maritime hub. Traditional marine petroleum fuel will generate a lot of greenhouse gases, which result in climate change, and extreme climate events happen as a result. We only have one typhoon, number 8, to this year, but in recent years we have no more number of typhoons, and the strength is stronger. Last year, the typhoon brought severe damages to our neighboring cities. This shows that extreme climate threatens the lives of the people and bring about significant economic damage. Also, petroleum fuel affect our environment. To minimize the impact caused by the climate change, a lot of countries in the world go for new decarbonization, and they are using more and more green fuels. Most of the cargoes are shipped by vessels. Greenhouse gases emitted by vessels account for 1/3 of the total greenhouse gases emitted. The International Maritime Organization stated that in 2030 to 2024, we have to reduce the greenhouse gas emission by 30%, and in 2025 we have to achieve a 2035 we have to achieve 0% of carbon emission. Starting from 2027, the International Maritime Organization plans to levy carbon tax on operators. And the concept of ESG has becoming more and more important. And decarbonization is one of the major ways for us to do that. Hong Kong is one of the 10 major bunkering ports of the world. In order to meet the greenfield demand from the industry, we have to develop greenfield bunkering as soon as possible. Otherwise, it will undermine our competitiveness. Ocean-going vessels will not call at Hong Kong port anymore. Greenfield bunkering has become a basic infrastructure for ports around the world. The two power companies must increase the use of liquefied natural gas in electricity generation. So in Sokhu Island, the two power companies have constructed a liquefied natural gas receiving port. We should develop ourselves into an LNG bunkering stations. In 2022, I have invited representatives from a number of ship companies and as well as Marine Department, CLB, to form a working group to promote Hong Kong into one of the LNG bunkering hubs. EMSD and Fire Services Department were also involved. Singapore is already making preparation for a LNG bunkering station. This shows that we have to catch up. Liquefied natural gas has been developed for a number of years, as at October 2023, there are some 700 vessels making use of traditional marine petroleum fuels. There are 150 ports offering LNG bunkering services. The density of green fuel is lower than traditional petroleum fuel. That is why we need to bunker more often. According to information, about 40% of vessels are still making use of LNG to fuel their vessels. Hong Kong is a place where a lot of vessels pass by. And 2 LNG bunkering stations been commissioned last year. I think that we should learn from the experience of Singapore and mainland by offering green fuel bunkering services. Hopefully, after passage of the bill, we can prepare for providing LNG bunkering services for vessels. LNG is just a transitional kind of energy. It will be replaced by clean energy, including methanol, ammonia, and hydrogen. The Liberal Party has always stressed that the bill has to be flexible enough so that we can accommodate new green fuels and that we can keep up with the time to offer green fuel bunkering services for sector. The TLB said that under the bill, a lot of new fuels have been allowed. Even with the emergence of new fuel, we don't have to amend the bill to accommodate that. As to the technical issues with the use of new fuels, especially safety and monitoring, the government will make reference to international standards and circumvent legislative amendment by publishing code of practice instead. We support that, but I hope that before publication of code of practice, the government will consult the sectors and make sure that the relevant employers and workers are well trained. As at early 2024, we already have green methanol bunkering vessels. Although the methanol vessels' cost of construction is higher and we don't have a lot of supply of methanol, but methanol can be generated from food waste and hydrogen. I think that there will be more vessels making use of methanol in the future, and the supply will be increased in the future as well, in turn lowering the price. There are only 4 methanol bunkering ports in the world. Our country is one of the major suppliers of methanol. That gives us the conditions of turning ourselves into a methanol bunkering hub. So the Liberal Party has invited a number of government departments to set up a working group to look into developing Hong Kong into a green methanol bunkering station. In 2023 policy address, it is said that we should offer methanol bunkering services, and the TLB has engaged a consultant to conduct a feasibility study on green methanol bunkering and promulgated the green methanol action agenda. I hope that we can start providing methanol bunkering services soon and set out a clear roadmap so that when ship companies plan their route, they will call at Hong Kong port and bunker here. President, apart from ocean-going vessels making use of new energy and new fuels, local vessels should also make use of new fuels. Although we have a lot of different types of green fuels on the market, vessels have to change their engines before they can use a new kind of fuels. But the cost of construction of a new vessel is high, and that's why the sector is having difficulty in making use of green fuel. If we have to achieve the goal of zero emission, the government must support the maritime industry. President, I so speak in support of the shipping legislation, use of fuels and miscellaneous amendments bill 2024. Thank you.
Dr. Low Wai Kwok. Deputy President, I and the BPA support the passage of the Shipping Legislation Use of Fuels and Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2024. We want to respond effectively to climate change. So decarbonization is a growing global trend. The International Maritime Organization, IMO, has set a target. So by around 2050, the target is to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions from international shipping. European Union countries have also tightened the requirements on carbon neutrality for the shipping industry. And then new fuels are being used, such as hydrogen, ammonia, and methanol. These fuels are to replace traditional petroleum fuels. Hong Kong is an associate member of IMO. We are also one of the busiest ports in the world. So our development index is ranked fourth in the world. So we need to follow the target set by IMO. At the same time, we need to speed up the development of a new green fuel bunkering. This will enhance our competitiveness in the shipping sector. Now, new fuels may have different physical and chemical nature, so there may be different means of carriage, storage, and combustion, and so the handling is different than that for petroleum fuels. That's why there are different requirements different regulatory requirements. So that's why there's a need to amend CAP 548. That's and at the same time, we have to consider the different environmental and safety risks and so on. So that's the reason why we have this bill. Now, we have to consider the fact that international standards and covenants may be revised from time to time. That's why the bill empowers the Secretary for Transport and Logistics to make regulations for giving effect to certain international agreements that are applicable to Hong Kong. And also, the relevant international standards are still in the infancy stage, so when making subsidy legislation, only certain requirements are included, but then the specific details will be included in the codes of practice to be made by the Director of Marine in future. I believe this is a practical approach because then we could promote the development of new fuel bunkering. At the same time, we will ensure the regulatory framework is in line with the latest international standards. The administration is taking on board or the collective wisdom of the Bills Committee. So the Secretary for Transport and Logistics will move an amendment to address an inconsistency in the English and Chinese text of a provision. Now, we need to expand our vision. The central authorities have passed a resolution. We must enhance the position of Hong Kong as an international trade, finance, and shipping center. So this is to follow the national strategy of development so that we could use our advantage to contribute to national development. Now, in the latest policy address, the Chief Executive said much on this area. That is, the SR government will lead the shipping industry and adopt a multi-pronged approach to enhance our international shipping center status. For example, the Hong Kong port, maritime and port. The current port development board will be renamed, so there will be a further promotion overseas and on the mainland, and then there will be a stepping up of training. The relevant fund for training, aviation, and shipping personnel will be expanded. As for building the shipping center, there will be various measures. Starting from this year, the Marine Department is starting to provide cash incentives for the ship operators or vessel operators that meet the green standards. That's the first measure. And secondly, the will be an action agenda on promoting the development of Hong Kong as a green bunkering green marine fuel bunkering center. We'll encourage vessels to use green fuels. There will be more collaboration with the Greater Bay Area, and we'll work with major trade partners to build the green shipping corridor. And there will be provision of information on safe bunkering and other safety information. So this is a combination of measures, and I believe that will help Hong Kong to upgrade its shipping center. And then we will enjoy an increasingly prominent status as an international shipping center. And at the same time, we could achieve the target of achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. So I speak in support of the passage of the Shipping Legislation, Use of Fuels and Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2024. I also support the proposed amendment of the Secretary for Transport and Logistics. Mr. Lam Chun Sing. Thank you, Deputy President. This bill is to allow vessels to use greener new fuels in Hong Kong waters. This is in line with the international shipping trend. It will also boost the competitiveness of our port. This bill is also in line with the policy intention in the policy address to develop Hong Kong into a green maritime shipping hub. Now, the FLU has a union on container terminal workers, and we have been reflecting our views to revenue departments on emissions and the impact on the health of workers in the container terminals. When we use traditional petroleum fuel, well, at the business hours, you see black smoke billowing from the container terminal. Workers have to work close to such vessels, and they have no choice but to breathe in such a black smoke. It affects their health. And statistics in 2013 to 14 shows that the carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide and particulates and so on all exceed the standards of WHO. And then in 2015, the government eventually amended the regulations on the use of fuels of ocean-going vessels in Hong Kong. So when ocean-going vessels berth in Hong Kong, they must use fuels that meet our standards. This will improve air quality and reduce emission. And then in 2019, there's also a regulation on controlling pollution, air pollution. So it again requires the vessels to use compliant fuels. And then in Pearl River Estuary, the government also works with the Guangdong authorities to set up a air quality control zone for vessels. And there's improvement in onshore facilities as well. So container terminal operators must assess the air quality of container terminals. If the quality is poor, there must be protective gear to workers. This is to ensure occupational health. Otherwise, workers will have to breathe in emissions as they work. And then for personnel who will operate new fuel vessels, the government must make clear what sort of training programs they have to undergo. And relevant guidelines and codes must be promulgated as soon as possible. So because in future, for new fuel vessels, they can only be operated by qualified personnel. So there's a need to help existing crew members to upgrade their skills. I note that in the bill, the relevant clauses or provisions on petroleum fuel are retained because in the foreseeable future, vessels will still be using petroleum fuel. That's why the relevant regulatory framework for petroleum fuel must be retained. So petroleum fuel can continue to be used. Now, apart from vessels, for land transport, such as taxis, buses, and so on, it's not easy for them to switch to new fuels en masse, and the progress is not quick enough. There's need for improvement. So it's the same with the vessels. We cannot expect all vessels to switch to new fuels soon enough. But then there is a need to set out a roadmap and timetable, and there must be incentives to encourage the sector to switch to new fuels. There must also be more support facilities for new fuels, for example, making it more convenient for bunkering of new fuels, and there must be clear guidelines to the sector. A roadmap and a timetable have to be laid down so as to show our determination to become a green port. I speak in support of the bill. Thank you.
Mr. Kennedy Wong. President, the third plenary session says that we have to consolidate a position as an international trading and shipping hub. In the policy address, the chief executive roll out measures to support the maritime industry and port development by creating a green maritime hub. According to the Ship Legislation, Use of Fuels and Miscellaneous Bills 2024, current maritime legislations will be amended. Apart from traditional maritime petroleum fuels, new fuels will be allowed to be used in Hong Kong, including ammonia, methanol, and hydrogen. And we will empower the Secretary for Transport and Logistics to publish code of practice to amend technical requirements on the use of new fuels. There is a trend to lower carbon emissions in the maritime industry. So I think that the green fuels will become more and more popular. The volume of green fuel vessels has exceeded 1,600. LNG vessels have account for 60%, and methanol vessels account for some 30%. There will be 20% of vessels in the future making use of new fuels. So we have to keep up with the times by developing new fuel bunkering to consolidate our position as an international maritime center. The Mama Party and I support the bill. Safety is important. There are different modes of bunkering for different kinds of fuels, and there may be different risks involved. Especially when we make use of both petroleum fuels and new fuels, we have to amend legislation to make sure that the vessels are making use of new fuels safely by making reference to standards of other countries and the mainland. I think that this is essential. And we have to build relevant infrastructures as soon as possible and develop relevant supply chain so that we can seize the development opportunities brought about by the trend of new fuels. We have to become a green fuel bunkering hub. So we need to have enough facilitation measures by amending our legislation. And we also have to consolidate our position as an international shipping hub. We have to work with the port clusters in the Greater Bay Area on the use of new fuels. We can leverage on the supply of green fuel in the Greater Bay Area and the construction of vessels in the district. I know that Guangdong has created a low-carbon new fuel supply chain from manufacturing, storage, conveyance, construction of vessels, green fuel bunkering. Their industry cover both upstream and downstream industries. I think that we should seize this opportunity by reinforcing our collaboration with Shenzhen, Nansha to develop green maritime services. Apart from this, we must work under RCEP and work with our partners and the countries along the Ocean Silk Road to consolidate our position as an international maritime center. I so speak in support of the bill and the amendment. Mr. Gary Chen. Thank you, President. President, I speak in support of the Shipping Legislation Use of Fuels and Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2024 to amend the current legislation to allow vessels to make use of traditional marine petroleum fuels and new fuels in Hong Kong waters, as well as to regulate the use of it. I think that this is a good start because this bill has offered a legal framework for the use of new fuels in Hong Kong, and the restrictions are not applicable to only known fuels in Hong Kong, such as ammonia and methanol. Even when we have new fuels, they can be used in Hong Kong when they're made available. In the third plenary session, it is said that we should consolidate our position as an international maritime and shipping hub. Our country and I share the dual carbon goals. We have to seize our opportunities and plan ahead. We must also promote green shipping and green fuel bunkering. IMO has said that by 2050, we have to achieve a net zero greenhouse gas emission. And the goal for 2030, the zero emission gas should account for 50%. We already have 500 LNG vessels in the world, and there are some 30 methanol vessels in the world, and there are also 200 LNG vessels and 130 orders of methanol vessels. So you can see that there is great demand for green fuels. As an international maritime hub, apart from amending legislation to remove barriers for the use of new fuels, we have to plan ahead by constructing a green fuel bunkering port or station to consolidate our position as a green shipping hub. We cannot purchase green fuel instantly. If we are to purchase methanol, LNG, or petroleum, well, we have to sign agreements before we can do so, and we have to buy futures for delivery of fuels in the future. What should we do if we want to purchase green fuels? Our local enterprises already has the relevant techniques, and in Inner Mongolia of our country, we already have factories manufacturing methanol. Every year, 100,000 tons of methanols can be manufactured, and they're about to be delivered to Shanghai, Tianjin, and Dalian for use. If we want to make use of green fuel, we must set a clear goal and work with our neighboring cities and suppliers early. Otherwise, it would be difficult for us to get hold of this green fuel when we have to compete with others for green energy. We rank the first in terms of a total tonnage of our vessels. In order to attract ocean-going vessels to use Hong Kong as one of their ports, we have to provide sufficient supply of green fuels. According to information, in 2028, the supply of methanol amount to 1,900,000 tons. The green methanol supply of our country is some 2 million tons. Our country ranks the first in terms of supply, but in terms of our future demand, we still have some gap to close. So I think that we should make use of our position and advantage to promote the development of green methanol in our country. In the policy address last year, the chief executive said that we should develop ourselves into a green fuel bunkering center. And this year, the chief executive said that we should develop a green fuel supply chain and improve the Hong Kong Maritime Port Board and turn it into a Hong Kong Maritime and Port Development Board. This shows that our government values green fuels, and this is in line with the strategy of our country. I hope that there will be more measures on top of legislative amendment. I hope that there will be more policies to support Hong Kong in developing into a green fuel bunkering center. I so speak in support of the bill.
Mr. Chen Su-hong. Thank you. President, I speak in support of the bill and the amendments to be moved. In the resolution adopted in the third plenary session of the 20th CPC Central Committee, it is said that Hong Kong's status as an international finance, maritime, and trade center should be consolidated. And in December 2023, the government promulgated an action plan on maritime and port development strategy. One of the strategies is to develop Hong Kong into a green port and enhance competitiveness of the Port of Hong Kong. With the amendments that we have in the bill, this will help us achieve that goal. Being environmental friendly is a global trend, and the maritime industry is no exception. The IMO said that by or around 2050, we should achieve net greenhouse gas emissions. There are interim goals as well. In 2030, the greenhouse gas emissions total amount compared to 2008, it should reduce by 20%. Compared in 2040, it should reduce by 70%. So we should follow the global trend. We should also develop Hong Kong into a green port to maintain our competitiveness. Right now in the maritime industry, there are many new fuels being used: LNG, methanol, hydrogen, and ammonia. Their physical, chemical nature, as well as the risks of conveyance and transport and storage, would be different from traditional fuels. There is no way around it but to amend legislation to make sure the use of the new fuels are safe. I think the bill comes at a right timing. It also helps develop Hong Kong into a green maritime fuel bunkering center. The bill amends the Merchant Shipping Local Vessels Ordinance and 4 pieces of subsidiary legislation to allow the use of new fuels, as well as to include certain safety considerations in legislation. Also, the Secretary for Transport and Logistics is empowered by this bill to make regulations by giving effect to certain international agreements. Right now, we're still at a development stage for new fuels. Therefore, for safety procedures and other requirements will be promulgated with administrative measures such as codes of practices to be published by the Marine Department. I consider this approach to be ideal because it will afford some flexibility. I also note that the Electrical and Mechanical Services Department, EFSD, will have, for the new fuels, some codes of practice as well. So I urge the administration, when having the Marine Department promulgate the codes of practice, can work with the EMSD to make sure there is proper interfacing between the codes of practice of the 2 departments. And when the strategy on hydrogen development in Hong Kong is released, gas safety ordinance will be amended. So I urge also the Transport and Logistics Bureau to work with the Environment and Ecology Bureau, EEB, to prevent any conflicts. In the policy address, it is said that an action plan on green maritime fuel bunkering will be released at the end of this year. I urge the plan to be promulgated as soon as possible so as to provide a blueprint for infrastructure for the use of green fuel and green fuel bunkering in Hong Kong in order to to hasten the pace of developing Hong Kong into a green shipping hub. I so submit speaking in support of the bill and the amendment to be moved. Mr. Benson, look. Thank you, President. I speak in support of the bill. I'm also a member of the Bills Committee and have participated in the scrutiny of the bill. The UNDP released last year a report. It says that the emissions of the maritime industry account for 3% of the total greenhouse gas emissions in the world. So there is a need to reduce emissions. One of the ways to do this would be to adopt new fuels. At the end of last year, the administration promulgated an action plan on maritime and port development strategy. One of the initiatives is to develop Hong Kong into a green port to enhance competitiveness of the Hong Kong port. Right now, we do see a slow increase in the number of vessels that use new fuels. However, our country is one of the biggest countries in ship manufacturing. Over half of the vessels on order make use of new fuels or dual fuels. We should see a drastic increase in future in the number of vessels that use new fuels. So developing Hong Kong into a green fuel bunkering center is very important. By amending legislation, the administration hopes to aid the development of such. I do appreciate the government planning in advance for such development. To use new fuels would be business facilitating and environmentally friendly. I myself have also been promoting the use of ESG. E means environment. And regarding the reduction of emissions, it is very important in this aspect. The bill says a lot about operations of ports and vessels that would include removing the tonnage restriction, as well as regulating the storage and operations of low flashpoint fuels. I urge the administration to continue to develop bunkering business and nurture the right talents for such. So we should also construct terminals that facilitate the bunkering of vessels so that vessels coming to Hong Kong can not only have cargo handling as well, on top of that, they can have bunkering done as well. In the policy address, it is said that an action plan on green maritime fuel bunkering will be promulgated and Hong Kong is to be developed into a green maritime fuel bunkering center. This action plan was mentioned in the Bills Committee meeting as well, and many members wanted to know more. This would help reduce emissions, and apparently some incentives would be provided to companies to adopt new fuels. There can also be collaboration with the Greater Bay Area to make sure there is complementary development and prevent any vicious competition. We can construct green shipping corridor between other Greater Bay Area cities and Hong Kong. I would suggest that we can take an extra step and make sure we have a development plan for new energy or new fuel bunkering infrastructure, including the laying of pipes and other forms of infrastructure to make the industry even bigger so as to grow the pie bigger. So not only will that enhance our ports facilities, it will also help connect the chain in the green energy industry. In order to consolidate the status of a green shipping center for Hong Kong, I think this is very important. I so submit.
Mr. Tommy Cheung. Thank you, President. I speak in support of the Shipping Legislation, Use of Fuels and Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2024. This bill involves amendments in 4 areas. Today, I'm going to speak mostly on the supply chain of a green maritime fuel and its importance in developing a green port in Hong Kong. You might, as you all know, 16 months ago, I and the Liberal Party met with the SL government, and we already proposed the idea of turning Hong Kong into a green port, because green fuel has immense potential as a market. And then there is also the national strategy of achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. We mentioned the use of hydrogen and methanol. At the time, Singapore was already ahead of us, so we needed to catch up quickly. And also, there's a huge market potential, so the government needs to develop this market rigorously. Now, methanol is a specific green fuel, and we want to build a bunkering center for methanol in Hong Kong for ocean-going vessels. Chief Executive announced that government would act on that, and in the latest policy address, there's mention of promoting the development of new fuels, in particular the development of a supply chain for sustainable green aviation and maritime fuel. At the same time, there will be long-term development for the bunkering business. Apart from liquefied natural gas, methanol is another green fuel being used by ocean-going vessels, as the Liberal Party pointed out. There's a report that mentions that from 2026, over 100 methanol fuel vessels will be deployed. In the next 5 years, there will be an additional demand for methanol to the tune of 4 million tons. So we can see there is rapid growth in the use of green maritime fuel. In Hong Kong, there are few containers going to Europe. Most containers originate from Yantian, and for Hong Kong going to the United States, there's just one vessel plying the route. So if we don't develop in this direction, there will be fewer and fewer vessels calling at Hong Kong. And I learned from shipping companies that there will be a surcharge if they don't use green fuels. I'm not going to dwell on the details. Rather, I'd like to mention this. I've been a legislator for some 2 decades. I've been an EXCO member for 8 or 9 years. I mentioned 16 months ago, I was in discussion with the government. I was in discussion with the chief executive. At that time, we said, well, yes, we needed to go in that direction, but there was not any formal discussion on how we would do it. Now, I would not have imagined 2 decades ago that we would see a bill or an ordinance that's never been contemplated before, and then within 16 months we're able to introduce this bill for enactment. I've never seen the government working with such speed on a new ordinance or particular ordinance. So I hope in future we will work as efficiently. Now, Mr. Frankie Yek, my fellow party member, already asked the shipping industry stakeholders and the two policy bureau to get involved even before the latest policy address was announced. He brought everyone together so they could work on this bill. So he involved all the stakeholders. So that's a good example of the executive and the legislature working together, and that's why we're able to introduce this bill in such a short space of time. Is receiving a second and third reading, so the Liberal Party supports the bill. Thank you. Mr. Yim Kong. Now, the third plenary session of the 20th Central Committee proposes that Hong Kong should have integrated development as an international trade, shipping and financial center. Now, we are seeing rapid development in the shipping sector. There is immense pressure on us. So that's why we need to seek and embrace changes. It's time for reform. The Transport and Logistics Bureau promulgated the action plan on maritime and port development strategy. And then in the policy address just delivered by the chief executive, there's mentioned that Hong Kong must be developed into a green port to enhance our competitiveness. So that's because it's time to change, and so therefore we need to seek and embrace changes. And the sector needs to work together with the government. Now, reducing emission and decarbonization are the global trend for the shipping industry. So that's why the IMO has set a long-term target. So by around 2050, there must be net zero greenhouse gas emissions from international shipping. Hong Kong is a major player in the shipping industry, so we have the obligation to help to achieve that target. In July 2023, Singapore took the lead to start a methanol bunkering facilities. And then in October this year, Singapore announced that it's the first country to adopt ammonia as a new fuel for ships. And then there is a port in Singapore that's working on a solution on ammonia bunkering, and they are introducing regulations on the use of ammonia. And the target is that before 2050 there will be bunkering standards. And then they could also achieve a net zero emission by then. So the Singapore adopts the approach of the government taking the lead, and then the sector collaborating with the government. So this is a model we can consider too. In the long run, we want to promote greenfield bunkering in Hong Kong. That's the global trend. This is also an important step for us to consolidate our position as an international shipping center. The government needs to proactively respond to the challenges in Hong Kong staying as an international maritime center. Now, Hong Kong is seeing a quick dropping transshipment volume. So green fuels have low cost. That's an important measure to keep ships calling at Hong Kong. Now, other operating costs are high in Hong Kong. We need to make the most of our advantage as a free port. And then we need to step up collaboration with the mainland and Middle East countries. So we must introduce cost-effective green and clean fuels. And we need to turn Hong Kong into a green fuel bunkering center. That means the government needs to give a subsidy to the sector for some time so that we could catch up, and then Hong Kong will become an important green maritime fuel bunkering center. We also need to leverage on our connection with the Greater Bay Area and work with the Guangdong province. Now, it's expected that green bunkering will be 500,000 tons in somewhere, and so that's in Shenzhen. So how can we make sure that we could have ships refilling either in Hong Kong or Shenzhen as a package? Now, I'm a member of the Bills Committee, so I support the bill. Thank you.
Any other members who would like to speak? If not, I now call upon the Secretary for Transport and Logistics to reply, then the debate will come to a close. Secretary. President, I move that the second reading of the Shipping Legislation Use of Fuels and Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2024 be resumed. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Mr. Frankie Yip, Chairman of the Bills Committee, and 6 members of the Bills Committee, as well as staff members of the LegCo Secretariat for their efforts and support, which have enabled the scrutiny of the bill to proceed smoothly, thus enabling the resumption of the second reading debate on the bill today. I would also like to thank all members who have spoken earlier for their valuable views on the bill. The bill was introduced into the LegCo for first and second readings on 10th of July this year, proposing amendments to the Merchant Shipping Local Vessels Ordinance Chapter 548 and 4 pieces of subsidiary legislation. A Bills Committee on the bill was formed in July. After discussing the details of the bill with the government, the Bills Committee expressed support for the bill. As I pointed out in moving the second reading of the bill on 10th of July, the IMO has set the target of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions from international shipping by around 2050. Promoted by the IMO and various countries, the industry is gradually switching to new low-carbon or zero-carbon fuels such as LNG, methanol, ammonia, and hydrogen in order to meet the ever-increasing international emission reduction targets and fulfill their ESG responsibilities. As an associate member of the IMO, Hong Kong is obliged to follow the emission reduction targets. With the increasing number of ships powered by green fuels and the growing popularity of such fuels, Hong Kong must accelerate the development of new fuel bunkering so as to consolidate and enhance our competitiveness as an international maritime center. In the 2024 policy address announced last week, it is proposed that we should expedite development into a green maritime center and establish a green maritime fuel bunkering center, which precisely reflects the government's determination in this regard. We will promulgate the action plan on green maritime fuel bunkering within this year, proposing a series of strategies and actions to further develop Hong Kong into a green maritime fuel bunkering center. The bill is an important step in the development of green fuel bunkering in Hong Kong. The bill seeks to allow ships to use new and more environmentally friendly fuels in addition to traditional petroleum fuels in Hong Kong waters under existing legislation, and incorporate into legislation additional safety and environmental considerations associated with the use of such fuels. On safety hazards, the new fuels are different from existing marine petroleum fuels in terms of their physical and chemical characteristics, the way they are stored, transported, and combusted, the operational risks, as well as the hazards to the environment in case of leakage, etc. Therefore, the proposed amendments in the bill provide for the use of new fuels in a way that will minimize the risks to vessels' personal safety and health and the environment, as well as the offenses and penalties. In addition, the MD Marine Department will enforce regulation under the existing legal framework in accordance with the established mechanism. For example, under the Merchant Shipping Local Vessels Ordinance, Chapter 548, the Director of Marine may draw up and publish in the Gazette codes of practice in respect of the requirements set out in the ordinance. The MD is now drawing up a code of practice for the bunkering of LNG, taking into account international standards and regulations as well as local circumstances. The work is expected to be completed this year. The MD has also commenced preparatory work for the development of a code of practice for methanol bunkering. The code of practice will cover technical and safety requirements related to the bunkering of specific new fuels, including the location of operational waters, risk assessment, and marine traffic impact assessment. bunkering management plan, contingency plan, crew training, and so on. In the future, the MD will also formulate and update the relevant codes of practice in a timely manner in the light of the development of new energy to ensure that they keep abreast of the development of the relevant technologies. The bill also proposes to remove the tonnage restriction on bunkering vessels lying alongside other vessels. Existing legislation prohibits a bunkering vessel exceeding 2,000 tons net register from lying alongside another vessel for the purpose of bunkering. We expect that with the increasing size of cargo ships in recent years and the use of new, less dense fuels in the future, the size of bunkering vessels will also be bigger. There is no restriction on the size of bunkering vessels as stipulated by the IMO or other major bunkering centers. Under such circumstances, we consider it necessary to remove the tonnage restriction to facilitate the operation of the industry. I would like to make it clear that there is no direct correlation between the size of bunkering vessels and the occurrence of safety incidents, and that the proposed removal of the tonnage restriction will not undermine Hong Kong's maritime safety. Irrespective of the type of fuel, vessels supplying and receiving fuel must comply with international conventions and regulations as well as local maritime legislation. As regards the training of crew members on the use of new fuels on board ships, crew members operating on board new bunkering vessels and vessels using new fuels are required to receive corresponding training to ensure safety. For crew members of OGVs, the IMO has set out the relevant training and certification requirements. As for local vessels, the MD will make reference to the relevant international standards and specify training requirements suitable for the local operating environment. The MD is currently in touch with local training institutions and organizations to discuss the provision of relevant training courses and will select and approve suitable training courses in other cities in the Greater Bay Area. As at October 2024, Hong Kong seafarers can already attend 8 new fuel-related training courses in the mainland which have been recognized by the MD. We will continue to explore more opportunities for new fuel-related training, including courses or seminars, etc., so as to help Hong Kong's industry professionals acquire expertise in the relevant technologies and keep abreast of the latest developments in global maritime decarbonization. I would also like to thank the members who spoke in support of the bill and for whether there will be any measures to support the transformation. In the 2023 policy address, it is said that in this year, we will promulgate the action plan on green maritime fuel bunkering and to promote the development of infrastructure for green maritime fuel storage. And that we should set up fuel bunker terminals, promote port emissions reduction, as well as construct a green shipping corridor with major trading partners and cooperate with ports in the GBA. We will make relevant announcements in due course. We also have to make a technical amendment in Clause 20 in order to ensure consistency in the Chinese and English texts. The relevant amendment will not affect the substance of the bill in any way. I will move the relevant amendment later during the committee stage. I implore members to support the bill so that it can be passed for implementation, thereby helping develop Hong Kong into a green port and a high-quality green maritime fuel bunkering center. Subject to the passage of the bill by the LegCo, we will make the commencement notice and table it before the Council for negative vetting in due course. I so submit. Thank you, President.
And I'll put the question to you that the shipping legislation use of fuels and miscellaneous amendments Bill 2024 be read the second time. Will those in favor please raise their hands? Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by a majority of the members present. I declare the motion passed. Shipping legislation, use of fuels and miscellaneous amendments bill 2020.